You're watching the TCMMA podcast.
Now, as we work our way into the main event, it's a big one. Flyweight division title on the line, not always a fan favorite, to say the least. But it is interesting where you got a guy in Asakura coming in a UFC debut situation and fighting for the belt. This just doesn't ever happen. I mean, it just doesn't happen. It's crazy when you think about it. And Asakura, thinks UFC benefits in a recent article saying if he defeats Alexandre Pantoja, the UFC benefits. I'm here to make it exciting. He tells MMA Junkie, let's be honest, it's good business for the UFC if I win. I'm here to make it exciting for people to have interest in the flyweight division and have a whole bunch of new matchups ready to have on future shows. So is it better? Yes, because we need some, Pantoja just dominates this division. We need someone to come in and potentially win. But then it's like, okay, guys from outside the UFC are potentially better than guys inside the UFC. So you sort of want the UFC guy to win too to protect the home turf and not open up that can of worms. But at the same time, it is the fight to make at this point in time. Researching Asakura, he's really good. Pantoja's a great, Alexander did great. But at the same time, Asakura is going to come in and present a problem because he's going to be harder to break down than other UFC fighters against UFC fighters. So highly interesting here, and hopefully Pantoja doesn't overlook this one. But let's jump into this fight. Prediction right now.
In the flyweight division for the flyweight division championship in your main event at UFC 310. You got Alexandre Pantoja, current champion. This is a bad dude, right? Taking on newcomer, a guy that brings a lot of hype with him. And in his UFC debut gets a title shot, which is very rare, in Kai Asakura. He's 21-4. Pantoja sitting at 28-5. So highly interesting matchup. Now Asakura is going to be 3 inches taller at 5'8". He's 31. Pantoja 34. Asakura's got a 1-inch reach advantage. Both guys stand right-handed. Now we know a little bit more about Pantoja, right? I mean, he lands like 4.4 significant strikes per minute. He lands like a takedown on average per round. He's got an average takedown defense at like 68%. And he's been on a tear lately, 6 straight wins, most recently against Steve Erceg in defense of the title. Won that by decision. Pretty close fight, though. Beat Brandon Royval by decision. Royval actually outstruck him, but 8 takedowns to none stifled that opportunity. So Pantoja is legit in that he can find ways to win, different in every fight. So he's very versatile. Now Asakura has 21 wins, 13 KOs, 3 submissions. So that's a big deal. He's fighting at a Risen for as long as we can see. He did lose a couple fights ago to Ogik Kubu. Never heard of him. Won the last 2 by KO over Montoya and Archuleta. And this is just odd to me, right? I mean, you're getting a guy making his UFC debut fighting for the title. What does that say about the rest of the division? Could Asakura come in here and win? Well, sure he can, because guys don't know as much about him as they do other UFC fighters. They're still going to be able to watch tape and all these type of things. But he's fighting non-UFC fighters at Risen. And he still has 4 losses. Now, he hasn't lost since the New Year's Eve 2021. But he's only fought twice since then. Missing out in 2022. Fighting 2 in 2023. We haven't seen him in 2024. This is just a big problem for me, that this guy gets to come in and just get a title fight. But the division is weak and there's nothing else to put up there. And thank goodness they had this fight with Bilal Muhammad having to pull out of the previous main event. So who's going to win this fight? I got to go with Pantoja, right? I just don't see a guy coming in their UFC debut and taking the belt. I mean, the fact that Dana White would even allow that to be a possibility is kind of crazy to me. And again, you never know. But this one is Brazil versus Japan. You know how I feel about the Brazilian fighters, how good they are anyway. Brazil's got the belt. I don't see him losing the belt against a newcomer. I know there's going to be a lot of people that weigh in and say, well, Asakura did this and Asakura did that. and he's really good, and he's not coming in and winning the belt in his UFC debut. That's the bottom line, and that's my opinion. Alexandre Pantoja dominates his fight to move to 29-5. Real simple. He'll do it on the ground, on the feet. He can do it in a multitude of ways. But Pantoja wins this fight, in my opinion. For the flyweight title, he retains it at UFC 310.
Yeah, and Pantoja better protect the home turf. That's the bottom line. We can't have a guy coming from outside the UFC and winning the title. Michael Chandler almost did it. I mean, he had to get through, I think, Dan Hooker first. Finished him. Almost finished Oliveira for the belt. And then Oliveira ended up winning that fight. So it really, in recent memory, can't go back, more than 6 or 7 years. I can't remember a time when a guy came in on a debut and won a UFC belt. Maybe in the early days when it wasn't, fully structured yet. But as we go further, that's going to be even tougher because guys want to get into the UFC as soon as possible, start making a name for themselves. So it makes it harder and harder for a guy to go his whole career and then come into the UFC on a title fight. I mean, it's just crazy. But that's why we have it. Alexandre Pantoja, one of the two, will hold serve in this one.
He's gon' fight, he's gon' fight. Hold your breath till the end of the night. Last fighter call, UFC at its height. Bringing that thunder with all his might. Saying, step up, wanna fight? Hold up, think twice. Gladiator, assassin, reckless, no abandon. Walk through that cage, he'll leave your ass.